Claude-Fable 5 swept every verified test against ChatGPT, and the context window gap alone is kinda wild. 1 million tokens versus 256,000. 4 times the room, and that's not a small edge. Both models just got updated, so now's the time to figure out which one actually earns your money. I'm running Claude-Fable 5 against ChatGPT across 5 real tests: reasoning, cost, context, speed, and creative writing, with 11 verified sources and no vendor money involved. And yeah, Claude-Fable 5 looks like the obvious winner on paper, but there's one area where ChatGPT might actually be the smarter call for you, and it comes down to a number that hits your wallet every single month. So who's this actually for? Anyone dropping $20 a month or more on an AI tool and wondering if they picked the right one. If you're writing long docs, doing content strategy, or running research workflows, the difference between these two is concrete, and I'll show you exactly where it shows up. Test 1, reasoning depth and accuracy. When a model gets this wrong, you don't always catch it right away. You get an answer that sounds fine, but the logic skips steps, the structure falls apart, and you end up rewriting half of it yourself. That's the hidden cost, your time cleaning up after a model that couldn't actually think through the problem. Alright, so what I found here is pretty interesting. Claude-Fable 5 hit around 95% on SWE Bench verified, according to third-party aggregators, and ChatGPT has no published figure at all for that same test. Then in a real-world SEO content strategy task, Claude-Fable 5 beat GPT 5.5 on structure and coherence, though the ChatGPT side used GPT 5.5, not the latest version, so take that with a grain of salt. Claude-Fable 5 takes reasoning. Honestly, I expected a closer fight, maybe ChatGPT holding its own on the structured task, but the data just wasn't there on their side. No benchmark, no published score. Claude wins on what we can actually verify, so we're at Claude-Fable 5.1, ChatGPT 0. Test 2, cost per token and subscription pricing. This is the one that sneaks up on you. You're building something, you run a few thousand calls, and then the bill shows up and it's way bigger than you planned. Getting pricing wrong at the start of a project is a real problem, so let's look at what the numbers actually say. So here's what I looked at. Claude-Fable 5's API pricing is $10 per million input tokens and $50 per million output tokens, straight from Anthropic. Community reports put GPT 5.5 at $5 input and $30 output. That's a big gap on paper, but these numbers come from separate sources, so I can't call this a clean head-to-head. No single source verified both sides together. This one's a tie, and honestly that surprised me because the raw numbers look like a clear ChatGPT win. But I was expecting a verified comparison and got 2 separate data points with no shared test, so I can't hand this to ChatGPT in good conscience without a proper side-by-side. Score stays at Claude-Fable 5.1, ChatGPT 0, 1 tied. Test 3, context window and document handling. If you've ever pasted a long document into a chat and watched the model forget the first half by the time it gets to the end, you know how bad this gets. You end up chunking things manually, losing continuity, and spending more time managing the model than actually using it. What surprised me here is just how massive the gap is. Claude-Fable 5 supports up to 1 million tokens, vendor claimed, but also backed by third-party docs. GPT 5.6 Sol tops out at 256,000, also vendor claimed. In practice, Claude's effective range is closer to 800,000 due to overhead, but that's still 3 times ChatGPT's total ceiling. Not even close. Claude-Fable 5 wins context by a mile. I kind of expected a gap, but not this wide. 3 times the ceiling even accounting for overhead, so if you're feeding in long reports, code bases, or research docs, ChatGPT just runs out of room way sooner. Running score moves to Claude-Fable 5.2, ChatGPT 0, 1 tied. Test 4, response speed and latency. When a model is slow, it breaks your flow, especially if you're iterating fast or running it inside a workflow where every step waits on the last one. A 2-minute wait for a first token turns a quick task into a frustrating slog, and that adds up across a whole workday. Okay, so this is where the data gets frustrating. Claude-Fable 5 at max effort runs at 73.1 tokens per second, with a time to first token of about 124 seconds, which is mostly thinking time. For ChatGPT, there's no published figure anywhere. It's basically a black box on this one, so I genuinely can't tell you which is faster. Speed is another tie, and this one stings a little, because I was expecting at least some published data from OpenAI's side. Community perception is that ChatGPT feels snappier, but I'm not scoring on vibes. No verified numbers means no winner. We stay at Claude-Fable 5.2, ChatGPT 0.2 tied. Test 5, creative writing quality. This one matters more than people give it credit for. When a model writes in a flat, generic voice, you spend as much time editing as you would have writing from scratch. Your tone gets lost, and the draft you got back is basically a starting point that still needs a ton of work. What I found here was honestly pretty clear-cut. In a community-run test across 64 creative outputs, Claude-Fable 5 beat GPT 5.6, Soul in every single genre, both raw and with a writing profile applied. You're producing more polished and stylistically appropriate drafts across the board. One caveat, this was a third-party test, not my own hands-on run, so take it as a strong signal rather than a guarantee. Claude-Fable 5 takes creative writing too, and this was actually the result I was least sure about going in. I figured ChatGPT would hold its own in at least a few genres, but it lost across all 64 outputs. That's a sweep. Final running score, Claude-Fable 5 3, ChatGPT 0 2 tied. So here's where Claude-Fable 5 clearly pulls ahead. 1 million tokens of context versus 256,000 means it handles documents 3 times longer without breaking a sweat. It swept GPT 5.6, Soul in every creative writing genre across 64 outputs. And on real-world SEO content strategy, it outperformed GPT 5.5 with stronger structure and multi-step reasoning. Now here's where ChatGPT has a real case. The per-token rates look cheaper. $5 input versus $10, $30 output versus $50 for Claude-Fable 5, though that comparison isn't fully verified. ChatGPT also has clearer subscription tiers with Plus, Pro, and Enterprise options, and community reports suggest it feels faster day to day, even if the speed data isn't published. Okay, so I went into this thinking it'd be tighter, and Claude-Fable 5 won every test we could actually verify. 3-0, the decision rule is pretty straightforward. If you're doing long document work, research, or creative writing, and you want the best output quality, go Claude-Fable 5. If you're cost-sensitive and running a lot of API calls on a tight budget, ChatGPT is probably the smarter call until that pricing comparison gets properly verified.